Good evening, everyone. My name is Irina MacArthur, and I'm Director of Patient Experience at Inception Fertility. Thank you very much for joining us today. I want to begin by acknowledging that attending this session, it takes a lot of courage, and I truly commend you for taking this step and prioritizing your emotional well-being. Today's webinar, Coping with Mother's Day, is one that holds deep meaning for so many of us. For those walking in the path of infertility, Mother's Days can be one of the most emotional, complex, and challenging times of the year. While society tends to blanket this holiday with flowers and joy and celebrations, we understand that it can be very difficult and brings a lot of grief and isolation. This session was created with one purpose in mind: to support you, to give you space to feel seen, validated, and genuinely connected and understood with compassion. And we hope to provide you with practical tools today. It's my absolute honor to welcome our speaker today, Dr. Dolmar. She's a pioneer in the field of mind and body medicine for women's health. And Dr. Dolmar is our Chief Compassionate Officer at Inception Fertility. She is also a doctor of, and actually a professor. I apologize, associate professor at Harvard Medical School. Her groundbreaking work has helped so many patients in this field. We will close the section with Q&A. So if you have any questions for Dr. Dolmar, please do not hesitate to jot them in the chat box, in the question box, and we will address them at the end of the session. Without any further ado, I'll pass the floor to Dr. Dolmar.
Thanks, Irina. So I'm here to talk about Mother's Day. And, I'm a psychologist by training. I've been seeing infertility patients since 1987. And Mother's Day can be hard, and if Mother's Day is not hard for you, I'll say this later in the presentation, kudos to you. But for most people who are struggling to build their families, Mother's Day is a tough day. Next slide, please. So, I've counseled thousands of patients as they've gone through Mother's Day. We all know how hard this journey can be. And, I'm here, Irina's here to support you, really for one of the harder holidays of the year for many people. Next slide, please. So what I really want to talk about is sort of why Mother's Day can be so hard, although that might feel obvious. Some practical coping strategies, what to say to others to be self-protective, and honestly, just setting boundaries. Because, I have had so many patients to say this is the day of the year they dread the most. And they also sort of mark infertility by Mother's Day. They're thinking, okay, so I have infertility now, but next Mother's Day I'll be pregnant or I'll have a baby. And then to have another Mother's Day if you're not pregnant and or don't have a baby can be really hard. Next slide, please. So let's talk about guilt. There are a lot of serious, silly things that cause guilt, and there's serious things about guilt. But I say this, I see patients about a half day a week, that you should never feel guilty that Mother's Day is a struggle for you. And you should never feel that you're selfish, that you don't want to just joyously honor, your mother and your mother-in-law and your sister and your sisters-in-law or whatever. Mother's Day can be a real struggle. Next slide, please. So, when I was writing this PowerPoint, I was thinking, what are the things that I feel guilty about in the past? And the first one is definitely me, that I still feel awful that there were two girls in middle school that I was mean to. And I am so not a mean person. And those are the only two people in my life I've probably ever been mean to, but I still feel guilty about it. And I've thought a lot about trying to find them and apologize to them. There are a lot of people who I know well who teased and beat up their younger siblings when they were growing up, and they feel guilty about that. Lots of people feel guilty that they got asked that they didn't get asked to the prom and their friends did, or that their friends got asked long before they did, or whatever else. Most of us acted out to our parents when we were teenagers, and many of us feel guilty about that. A lot of people, as they go through infertility, especially, feel really guilty about how much they drank while in college. And envy is not a terrible thing, but a lot of people do feel envious of other people, even when your life is pretty good. And I had a patient years ago ask me, is it good or bad to compare yourself to somebody else? And I thought about it for a while and I said, it's really good to compare down, but we don't compare down, we compare up. And so when we look at our lives, we look at people who have more money than us, or have nicer homes than us, or who are thinner than us, or have better jobs than us, who have nicer families than us. And in fact, that is actually one of the reasons why volunteering, like in a soup kitchen or something, actually is a really good treatment for depression or anxiety. Because forcing yourself to help people who are worse off than you actually helps you feel better. But please don't feel guilty about struggling about Mother's Day. Next slide, please. So, when we were all little kids, Mother's Day was a lot of fun. I remember, making Mother's Day cards for my mom. I'm sure we all remember making those little clay pots where you would take clay and you turn them into snakes and you'd make these coil pots and then you'd paint them. And, when you were 6 years old and you gave that to your mom for Mother's Day. Or, you might remember, baking a cake with your dad for your mom, or buying flowers for her, um, serving her breakfast in bed, or going with your dad while he bought her a gift and that you helped pick it out and actually kept a secret. I never kept a secret, but some people did. So it might have been a lot of fun when you were a kid to celebrate your mom or your grandmother, but now maybe not so much. Maybe, all the ads you see everywhere about Mother's Day, the cards in every store, the flowers, et cetera, might very well be a reminder of what you don't have yet and what you really want as a child or another child. Next slide, please. So during infertility, Mother's Day takes on a whole new meaning, because yeah, you can still potentially celebrate your mother and your mother-in-law and your grandmother, but it's not celebrating you in the role you want more than anything else. And so it can have a really different meaning. And as I said, there's so much in social media and TV ads and newspaper ads and magazine ads about how to celebrate Mother's Day. And, how can you be the best child to your mother? And how will you be honored by your children? And, it's all well and good if you're a mom, but if you're wanting to be a mom and you're not a mom, that's where it gets really hard. Next slide, please. So a lot of people going through infertility just feel really left out or invisible. People get really excited about Mother's Day. You might have a friend, it's her first year as a mother, and she's all excited and she can't stop talking about it. You may very well, as I said, feel guilty that you can't celebrate other people because you're jealous, you're envious. And, that's a really normal, very self-protective, good emotion to have about now. You may feel very angry or sad when people make insensitive comments to you, and I'll talk about those in a little while. And you might, if you have family traditions of the family gathering at your mother's house or your grandmother's house or your mother-in-law's house for Mother's Day, that might be a real trigger for you, is to have to celebrate all the other mothers in your life except for yourself. Next slide, please. So I just want you to think for a second. I don't want you to share this, but what do you think are your top 3 emotional triggers about Mother's Day? Is it, people being insensitive to you? Is it you feeling obligated to celebrate other mothers and no one stops to think how hard a day this is for you? And I also want to start thinking, what boundaries can you put in place to protect yourself over Mother's Day and between now and Mother's Day? So if you happen to be one of those rare individuals who's fine with Mother's Day and you feel really good about honoring your mother or your mother-in-law or your grandmother or your siblings, good for you. If Mother's Day doesn't bother you, kudos to you. You're in the minority, but you're showing a lot of strength. And you also might find that, early in the process, Mother's Day may not be so hard, but maybe your second Mother's Day of infertility might be harder. But if you find Mother's Day to be hard, I've got some ideas for you. Next slide, please. So I just had cataract surgery, and so I can't read things. They changed me from being farsighted to being nearsighted, so I have to take my glasses off to read now. So, as I've said over and over and over again, number one, please don't feel badly about really struggling during this time. Mother's Day, most of my patients have said that Mother's Day is the hardest day of the year for them, or the time leading up to Mother's Day is really hard. So I'm asking you, how can you be self-protective? How can you protect yourself when you feel like the whole world is celebrating mothers, of which right now you're not one? And if you have a mom or moms in your life, how can you appropriately celebrate them without hurting yourself? So how can you take care of yourself and be a good daughter or daughter-in-law or granddaughter simultaneously? And so I would ask you questions, do you really have to go to your parents' home or your in-laws' home for the big Mother's Day celebration? I think it's a really good idea if you develop a stomach bug that day. And oh gosh, you can't go to Mother's Day if you have a stomach bug. I've heard that norovirus is going around. In fact, I know someone right now who has it. Maybe you've been exposed to COVID. Maybe you tested and you tested positive for COVID. And I'm saying these in quotes, because these days nobody wants you near them if you have a stomach bug, and no one wants you near them if you have COVID. And those are very plausible reasons why you can't go to a celebration that makes you uncomfortable. Next slide, please. So, when I talk to my patients about, how can you cope for the next week and a half? Number one, please be kind to yourself. This is a time where you really need to be self-protective. And, as I said, if you have to develop COVID or norovirus or whatever, that might be a good thing. You definitely want to limit exposure to social media, because this is the time when everyone starts showing pictures of their families and, everything that people are doing for them for Mother's Day. And as the time gets closer, people are going to post pictures of all the flowers they got and the candy and the jewelry and everything else. There's no reason why you can't buy yourself flowers or candy or jewelry. We'll talk in a minute about this is a really good time to do things that bring you joy. And you're under doctor's orders now that if you want to skip a Mother's Day event, it really is okay. You're not going to skip these events for the rest of your life, but maybe this year it's okay if you skip a Mother's Day event. Next slide, please. So if you if you have to go to your parents' house, your mother's house, your mother-in-law's house, your grandmother's house, your sister's house, or whoever it is, and COVID isn't doing it for you, here's some ideas. So you want to be prepared for people saying things that they feel are well-intentioned but actually hurt you. And so people are going to say things like, so when are we going to celebrate you as a mom? And, what do you mean you have to leave early? Don't you want to honor your mother or your mother-in-law? And, this is the first year your sister's a mom. You're being really selfish if you can't celebrate her. And these are things that people have actually said to my patients. And I just can't fathom ever saying that to somebody. But, I think honestly, I've been working in this field a long time. I think if someone hasn't been through it, they don't know, they rephrase that. They usually don't do this on purpose, and they really don't know the impact and the pain they're causing by saying things like that. And I do tend to give people the benefit of the doubt most of the time. Next slide, please. So you got to set boundaries. If you have a partner and you're going to a Mother's Day event, you have to set boundaries. You need to plan an exit strategy. Exit strategy. I woke up at 4 this morning and I couldn't go back to sleep because I was so fired up from the Celtics game last night. Sorry. So you need to plan an exit strategy. So, if everyone starts talking about mothers or babies or people start bringing out infants, that's a really good time for you to leave. You've come, you've brought gifts, you've eaten your, Aunt Lois's carrot cake, and now is the time to go, even if other people aren't leaving yet. If you have a partner, bring your partner. If you don't have a partner, bring a friend. It's much easier to go to these things with somebody who can support you, who can deflect comments for you. But have a signal. Like, it's like, tugging on your ear or running your hand through your hair, whatever, which means you need to get out of there. And you don't care what they say to get you out of there, but they got to get you out of there. And while you're at the event, you don't have to sit in a room with 3 pregnant women and 2 babies. You can wash dishes in the kitchen. You can take a walk. You can tell people you have a headache and you need to lie down. There are lots of ways to get away. You can, if there are a bunch of men in another room watching I guess basketball this time of year, there's no football. Watching basketball or baseball or hockey playoffs or basketball playoffs, join them. Don't feel like you have to sit with people who make you feel uncomfortable. Next slide, please. So I'm a big believer in being self-protective. And so I call these snappy comeback lines. And you probably have a fairly good idea of what people say to you that really triggers you. And so if you have a fairly good idea of what people say to you that triggers you, then I would suggest you memorize some snappy comeback lines. And snappy comeback lines can be polite, they can educate the other person, or they can be zingers. And I like zingers, but they're meant for people who pretend to be kind, but are really being mean or competitive. And you know who they are. They might be a sibling, it might be a sister or brother-in-law, it may be a nasty old aunt. It doesn't matter, but there are people who do say things that hurt you and they don't seem to care. So what I'd like you to do is to sort of take a few seconds now to think about what are things that people might say to you in general, and especially on Mother's Day, that will be a trigger for you. And then we'll go through, memorize what you want to say in return. Because I'm the kind of person, this happens to me all the time, that someone says something mean to me or something that makes me feel bad. And 3 days later, I think of what I should have said in return. Like I just don't think on my feet, and it's really hard for me to zing people, especially on my feet. And so what I try to do is if I know I'm going to see somebody who tends to be mean to me, I try to memorize a few zingers in case the people know who they are. Anyway, so again, think about things that people say to you that trigger you, and then think about a polite answer, an answer to educate the person, or if they're purposely being mean to you, zing them right back. Next slide, please. So for example, you walk into Mother's Day, you have flowers for your mom, you bring candy for your sister, et cetera, et cetera. And someone says to you, well, when are we going to be celebrating you as a mom? And, you're not supposed to slap them. And, a polite response could be, I hope really soon. That would be great. I hope it's really soon. Or you could try to educate them. And you could say, achieving motherhood can be more challenging for some people than others. And so, yes, we would love to be parents, or I would love to be a mom, but it's taking time. Or you can be assertive, and this is a zinger, and say something like, that comment's really painful. I would really appreciate in the future that you'd be more sensitive. And that's about as nice a zinger as I can come up with, because my zingers are usually pretty nasty. Sorry. Next slide, please. So if you have a partner, and you're going to a Mother's Day event, you need to talk beforehand what's comfortable for you and what's not comfortable for you. So if your partner's sister, for example, has had a baby and your sister-in-law says, oh, do you want to hold the baby? Your partner can sort of, swoop in and say, oh, let me hold the baby or whatever else, just to protect you. And as I said, come up with some kind of signal so that when you need a break or you need to leave, your partner is going to play defense for you. And afterwards, the two of you should talk about, what felt okay about the event and what didn't feel okay about the event. But definitely, especially if it's with your partner's family, let them take the lead on protecting you and just handling relatives. And, I've had I have actually seen in my career, I think 2 or 3 mothers-in-law, because they were so mean to my patients. And finally, I said to my patients, you know what? Just bring her in here, let me deal with her. And honestly, a lot of the times the mothers-in-law don't mean to be bitchy. They just say what they're thinking. And we all know the kind of people who sort of lack the filter and just say what they're thinking. But if your partner knows their mother is like that, they need to play defense. I'm trying to remember the football term where a quarterback is always protected. But anyway, your partner should be that person for you. Next slide, please. So here's some do's and don'ts. And actually, I think we have this first one twice because I really like it. So just make a list of joys. Make a list of 20 things that make you smile. And you'll see the last one. Things like buying yourself flowers. Get yourself a sweet smelling bouquet every Monday. was in New York last week, and at every street corner you could buy lilies. And so I bought 2 lilies, and over the course of the week, literally, I was staying in a friend's apartment, like every room in the apartment smelled like the lilies, and it just made me happy. Or, buy yourself a box of really good chocolates and have one really good piece of chocolate every day. Um, if Mother's Day is hard for you, the following weekend, plan a special weekend. That's a non-Mother's Day weekend for you. Journaling your emotions always helps. Write down your thoughts and feelings. Talking about them keeps them frozen in time, but write them down. You'll get some insight and catharsis by writing them down. And if you're mad at somebody, write about why you're mad at them. Connect with other people. Join a support group. Look what Resolve has to offer. Resolve is the National Infertility Organization. They have support groups in every state. A lot of Prelude clinics have support groups for free, where you can just meet once a week or once a month and just talk to other people who are going through this. I think one of the hardest things about this is you do have to accept the fact that people who've never been through this have no idea how hard this is for you, and they have no idea what to say. And so you might need to educate people. And again, my husband calls me a pathological optimist, but I do believe most people don't try to be mean. I mean, yes, there are lots of mean people out there, but I think people don't try to be mean. And I think educating them about infertility, if you feel you can do that, is a good goal for you. It might make Mother's Day easier for you if you can explain to people why this is so hard. And you can tell them that I said that Mother's Day is really hard for the vast majority of people going through infertility. Next slide, please. So again, we've said this before, if you have to attend a Mother's Day event, and I would really strongly recommend you develop a stomach bug, but if you have to attend a Mother's Day event, have an excuse why you have to leave. So you have to leave because, you need to walk your dog, or you have to leave because you have to go to your in-laws for Mother's Day, or you have to leave because you have to leave for a work trip. I don't care what you have to lie about, just get out of there if you can't bear staying. As I said before, if you have a partner, have a prearranged signal so that you both can coordinate leaving when you need to leave. And, as I said before, take a walk, nap, help out in the kitchen, go outside, play with the dog, do whatever you need to do to be self-protective. Next slide, please. So a few don'ts. Please don't force yourself to attend events. I know people feel this obligation, like, oh gosh, it's my sister's first Mother's Day. It's my sister-in-law's first Mother's. I don't care. This is a temporary crisis. I'll talk about it at the end, but please don't force yourself to attend. This is hopefully the last Mother's Day where you're not going to have good news. And so don't force yourself. Don't host, because the problem is if you host, you can't leave early. The good thing about hosting is you can spend the whole time in the kitchen. But if you don't want to host, don't host. Don't go shopping in stores that are packed with Mother's Day. So going to florist shops and boutiques and things like that is probably not a great idea. It's going to be full of Mother's Day stuff. And don't bottle up your emotions. Talk to people, talk to your partner, talk to a therapist, join a support group, go online, find, chat rooms where you can vent. Don't keep it inside. Next slide, please. So as I said before, I think the hardest thing to remember is that infertility is a temporary crisis. You are not going to feel this way for the rest of your life. And just right now, focus on getting through a week from Sunday, one day at a time, and maybe, and hopefully, and I really hope for you that next year, Mother's Day will be a very different experience. Next slide, please. And you know what? You have to remember you're not alone. At inception, we see 50,000 new patients a year. And there are lots and lots and lots of people. And currently, the current United States stats, which I assume probably also covers Canada, it's 1 in 6 people are going through infertility at some point in their reproductive years. 1 in 6, which means that a lot of people that are going through infertility or have gone through infertility or who will go through infertility. It's very common. But your feelings are valid. Your boundaries are matter, and you need to take care of yourself. Next slide, please. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I think Irina said you can put questions in the chat box or whatever it's called.
Thank you, Ali. I actually, I'll start this session with a question that I have. We covered quite a few important topics during the session today, but, I was thinking about it as you were talking, disconnecting yourself from the people that might say hurtful things, and it might not be intentional. People might not realize how hard this journey is for you. But what would be your recommendation on rebuilding the friendship after you've been, you pulled away yourself for extensive period of time to go through IVF and everything else? What would be your recommendation on going back on track with your friendship and going back to normal after you have a positive news?
I think the fact is that good people will come back. And a good friend will understand why you had to hibernate a cocoon, for example, while they were pregnant and you were going through infertility. And maybe this is a way to figure out who your real friends are.
Mhm.
A real friend's not going to be angry with you for not celebrating their baby. And people will come back. Good people will still be there. Your cousins will still be there. Your good friends will be there. They will be there. And maybe if some people don't come back, maybe the friendship wasn't as deep as you thought it was.
That's fair. Thank you. All right. So, the first question, how do I let go of jealousy if I feel when others are celebrating becoming mothers for the first time, especially people who are so close to me?
You know what? I wish I could answer that question with some brilliant, life-altering response. You know, feeling incredibly envious of other people who get pregnant, especially if they get pregnant easily. And anyone who's done one of these with me knows that it drives me crazy when people say, "Oh, I got pregnant the first time I tried." I'm like, I don't want to know how many times you had sex. I just, just tell people you're pregnant and don't brag. Um, you're gonna feel jealous. You
Mm.
know, it's human nature that if there's something you want more than anything in the world and you're going through so much to get it and spending money and giving yourself shots and going to the clinics for vaginal ultrasounds and all the yucky stuff that having a baby through treatment involves, and someone else has sex with their partner and gets pregnant, that feels really unfair. And we get the most upset when things are unfair. And it's unfair. It's unfair that anyone has to go through infertility. And if you are feeling jealous, it means you're having a normal and healthy reaction. And just accept the fact that it's really hard and it doesn't feel fair. And think about how to be self-protective. And if one of your friends got pregnant easily, or if your sister got pregnant easily, you know, most of us wouldn't wish infertility in other people. But it doesn't mean you have to, go gaga over the pregnancy or go gaga over the baby. As I said, just send a nice gift.
Mhm.
And then hopefully when you've joined the motherhood club, you'll come back.
Right. That's a very good advice. Thank you, Ali. You already touched on this subject during our webinar, but there's a question. So one of the patients is asking, my sister just had a baby, and my family expects me to host a Mother's Day brunch. I don't think I can handle it. How shall I say no without causing family drama?
Okay, so I don't like to tell people that I'm a believer in lying, but I'm a believer in lying. I think, Mother's Day weekend is a really good weekend to paint your bathroom. Because if you paint your bathroom, your sister is not going to want the new baby exposed to those fumes. So you can't. How can you host if the whole place, apartment or house smells like paint, then you can't use the bathroom because the walls are wet. It sounds stupid, but that again, see, I actually did think on my feet with that one. Think of a reason why you can't host.
Mhm.
If you can afford it, say let's all go out to brunch or something. But please don't put yourself through that. Is again, if you're hosting, the disadvantage is you can't leave early. The advantage is you can just hide in the kitchen.
Okay. Thank you. Ali, let's talk about grief a little bit. Is there such a, thing as anticipatory grief? How can our patients prepare themselves emotionally for the pain that they know it will happen to them during this Mother's Day weekend?
I think the best thing one can do is prepare. And, and again, if you have a partner, the two of you or you on your own, figure out how can you make Mother's Day as easy for you as possible. And maybe it means going for a hike on Mother's Day, or maybe it means going to a movie theater and watching movies all day. Or, there are lots of things that you can do for you. You don't have to, so, or you can spend all day in bed eating Haagen-Dazs and watching chick movies. You got to think what's going to make you feel. And again, I'm not telling you, you're not going to have horrible Mother's Days for 20 years. Hopefully, this will be your last Mother's Day where you're very sad. And so you need to figure out how to take better care of yourself this Mother's Day just to get it over with, just get through it. And then things will get easier. And as I said, I think a great thing is to make plans to have a non-Mother's Day weekend, the weekend after Mother's Day.
And I believe, Mother's Day is a widely celebrated holiday in North America. I don't think it's celebrated to this extent anywhere else in the world.
Oh, Americans are nuts about holidays.
Right. So if you really want to escape, maybe, take a trip to, other country where
Go
where
to, go to a country where the 11th is not Mother's Day.
oh, exactly, right. All right. The next question is actually came up, and I've never seen this question before. So I'm very
Uh-oh.
curious how you're gonna
Oh my
handle
goodness.
this, Sally.
Ah,
As someone who identifies as LGBTQ
yep.
plus, I sometimes feel excluded from traditional infertility and Mother's Day conversations. How can I find more inclusive support?
That's a really good question. And, it's something that, we're seeing more and more of because a recent study showed that 60% of people from the LGBTQ plus community want to have families. And in fact, I was just talking to a patient this morning, a man married to a man, trying to figure out, how do you choose an egg donor? How do you pay for a surrogate? Things like that. So it's getting far more common. And I would actually probably start with a family equality council, because they are an organization dedicated to helping people from the LGBTQ plus community build their families. And actually, I'm certified by them as an LGBTQ plus therapist. Um, Mother's Day is going to feel the same no matter what your gender or sexual orientation or whatever else. So it's really hard to feel excluded. And people from the LGBTQ plus community feel excluded anyway. And so it can make it worse. But you need to honor yourself. If you are somebody from that community who wants to be a mom, it doesn't really matter who you sleep with or what genitalia you were born with. The feelings are the same. Your families may not get that, and your friends may not get that. I get that. People from your community will get that, and people from the Family Equality Council will get that.
Thank you. Ali, there's a question that is actually it's very difficult one even for me to read. But very important that we address that. A patient had a miscarriage a few months ago, so it's already a heartbreaking event on its own. And she doesn't feel like she's being supported just to move on yet, and didn't move on yet from that event. Do you, she's asking, do I have a right to grieve on Mother's Day even though no one
Absolutely.
saw her as a mother?
I mean, the expression I use for people who've had a pregnancy loss is you're a mom with empty arms. And it's not my original mind, but I read it somewhere that someone who had a loss is a mother with empty arms. And so, yeah, you absolutely have a right to celebrate yourself in any way you can. And I think it'd be a great day to honor that little soul. So whether you write a letter or create a poem or plant a plant in honor of that little soul, it honoring the soul of this unborn baby can really help you with closure and to say goodbye and to grieve in a healthier way.
Thank you. I know it's a very difficult subject, and I can only imagine what this patient is going through.
Oh, I mean, I've had a miscarriage. It's terrible. Um, It's a, and I thought when I had a miscarriage, I'd probably counseled 1,000 patients who had a miscarriage, and I thought I knew everything there was to know about having a miscarriage until I had a miscarriage. And then I realized how hard it was and how it takes a long time to recover and to grieve and to mourn that loss.
I don't see any upcoming questions. We'll maybe give a couple of more seconds for anyone to drop the question in the chat box, and I'll be happy to address those questions. But if not, I just, wish you a lot of courage this upcoming weekend. I know it's not going to be easy, but we're here for you. You're not alone. And there's a community there for you. You've been seen and you've been heard.
Absolutely. I wish you all the best. Be self-protective, get COVID, lie in bed, and eat bonbons.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much and have a good evening.